everybody, and welcome back to the New Columbia Movement YouTube channel. I appreciate you guys joining us for the month of January as we sit down and have our monthly roundtable, which we do every month. We never miss a month. We definitely did not miss December. And if you think we did, you're wrong. So happy to have my astute panel of guests tonight, joined by Liam, Alex, and Micah. And we're just going to kind of go over the events of the month as we saw them, have a little bit of discussion on them, try to provide some insight and input on what we saw, what we're thinking, what the path forward is. So appreciate you guys being here with me. Obviously, as I say in all these, this is just a reflection of our opinions. We're not necessarily speaking directly for the organization. If you are new to our organization, want to know more about us, I direct you to the website. You can look in the description down below. Go check us out. You can follow us on social media. You can read our manifesto and learn a lot more about us through all that. So please do check us out. But for now, let's start going around the table. I will kick things off. We'll talk about what our vices for the night, because we at the New Columbia Movement are of our vices. So I've got just a little cigarillo tonight. I've been getting on the cigarillos. Liam, when we were in we went to that cigar lounge in Atlanta a few months ago. I think Joe was the first one to introduce me to this, to the idea and the concept of a cigarillo. So now I realize I can enjoy a cigar without having to smoke a whole cigar, which I'm really appreciating. So this is a Macanudo Cafe. It's a nice light Connecticut wrapped cigarillo, and I'm enjoying it with a beer. And I actually brought the whole shebang out. I was at Costco a couple weeks ago, and they had my favorite beer there, like a wine-sized bottle. This is Chimay. It's the Grand Reserve. It's brewed by Trappist monks in Belgium at the Scormont Abbey. It's actually really, really good beer. I first had it in Orlando. Ian from our chapter introduced it to me, and I was really happy with it. You can usually find it. They have it at Costco right now. I don't know if they're still selling it at Costco, but I know I've seen it at like Total Wine and stuff like that. So good beer, supports the monks. I encourage you to drink it. Micah, what do you got?
See, I'm smoking the pipe here, a little bit of a pipe aficionado. I've got Peterson Early Morning Pipe, which is an English tobacco blend. This is a very classic, originally mixed by Dunhill, but Peterson bought it now, keeping it around. It goes back to the turn of the last century. So it's a real mild English smoking blend, and I'm smoking it out of my Falcon pipe, which is also an English pipe. And it's pretty cool because the bowl actually comes out.
That actually is super cool. I've never seen that.
It's got like and then the stem's aluminum, and it like collects the moisture. So after you're done smoking it, you can like kind of supposed to have it like a cooler, drier smoke. But yeah, it's real classy looking pipe. I've seen pictures of Carl Jung smoking the same pipe. So that's kind of cool.
No, really? It seems like it'd be easier to clean too.
It is, yeah. It's like, I don't know if it's easier, but the idea of it is that instead of having different pipes that you rotate through, like you can have a different bowls and just put the bowl in. I only have one, but it's a fun pipe to smoke out of.
Well, they say you're supposed to rotate your pipes to not wear out the pipes too much whenever you, especially if you're smoking every day. Like Young probably.
You can buy like different, like all kinds of different. You can have like Meerschaum or like all kinds of different, different briar bowls or whatever. So you can, have one. It was like some kind of like hip idea in the '60s. So it's not a super popular. You won't see too many of these around, but they are kind of got like a cult following amongst people.
That is pretty cool.
It's not an expensive pipe, but it's like, it's a little step above like, just like a corn cob or something. But I think
it'd be cool to have in the collection at least.
Yeah, it's a cool pipe.
All right, Liam, what's your vice for tonight?
Unfortunately, I can't smoke any cigars in my hotel room, but if I could, I would smoke a St. Francis from All Saints. And if I had a bottle of whiskey, I like Nelson's Greenbrier Tennessee whiskey. But unfortunately, I'm completely dry.
So you're saying you wouldn't smoke Michael Knowles' new selection of cigars?
I've not even managed to get my hands on a sniff of it, so I couldn't tell you.
They're actually pretty expensive. I was surprised. I want to try one, but I don't know if I want to try one that bad. And it seems like he's pretty sold out already. So, oh well, next time. Alex, what do you got?
Fortunately, like Liam, I do not have my vice. I make mead, and I had drank all of it all of last week, so I am fresh out of it.
All right. Well, sober January, I guess. All right. Well, we did not we did not. Those of you who caught on, we did not do a roundtable in December. So, say what you will. December was a pretty slow news month, relatively speaking to the time that we're living in. I don't think people living in the 1990s would be able to keep up with our news cycle, but relatively speaking to the 2023, 2024 timeline, pretty slow news cycle. Plus, it was the end of the month, Christmas, New Year's. Hope you all had a very happy Christmas and happy New Year's. There just wasn't a lot to talk about, but January has been a little bit of a different, scenario. And we started off with what almost seems like a bit of a meme headline, with a little thing going on in Brooklyn where maybe some tunnels were being dug. What's going on there? I want to pull up this video from Brooklyn under the Chabad Lubavitch headquarters of the world, by the way. And these guys are pretty influential. They I think like the first, if I remember this correctly, the new Argentinian president, like the first visit he made was to the Chabad Lubavitch tunnel, or not to the tunnels, maybe to the tunnels, I don't know, but to the headquarters in Brooklyn. Pretty wild. So what do you guys take on this? What's going on with these tunnels here in Brooklyn?
I mean, if you would have told me this a couple months ago, I may have chuckled, but I never would have taken it seriously. It's absolutely mind-boggling, but it's a reminder of the odd timeline we just happen to find ourselves in.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed really odd to me that it wasn't just like there were tunnels. I mean, in the beginning of this video, beginning of this video is pretty downright comedic. This guy's just crawling out of the tunnel. But the reaction to it, like we saw later in this video, when the police actually came to shut it down, look at this. It was like they were rioting to keep it from happening, which is insane. So like, it was an illegal activity. And then on top of that, when they come to lawfully shut down illegal activity, they're causing a big fuss about it.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but officially didn't this group's claim that they were just trying to get more space for like storage of things officially?
Yeah, I think it was a couple different things. They were saying they were trying to expand. The tunnels ran to like a bathhouse or something like that, some kind of ceremonial building for the Jews.
It was formerly the house of one of their rabbis, I believe, and they were trying to connect to it. They don't actually control that house, and it's now a bathhouse or another property.
Right. I mean, come on, guys. They're illegally digging out underneath them, like, and hiding it. So
yeah,
I think if they wanted to do a little expansion or something, they could do that above board. So whatever they were doing, they didn't want people to know about it.
Well, yeah, and it is concerning because there is a history, particularly with the Chabad Lubavitch sect, of sexual abuse, especially with minors. And they found like soiled mattresses in this tunnel. It's like, what, and they were going out of their way to hide the dirt and do all these types of things. So, I'm not going to make any wild assertions of what it was or what it wasn't, but it was just a very weird thing to see. And it really dominated the headlines, I guess, at the beginning of January, because it was a little bit of a slower news cycle. But, still, nonetheless, it's kind of concerning to see this stuff like this, especially when you realize, the types of the influence that Chabad, if this was just some weird, offshoot Christian or Jewish sect or whatever that, really didn't have any sway or influence in the world, it'd be like whatever. But these guys are important people. At least they seem to think so, and they're they have a lot of influence in global politics and stuff like that. And of course, understanding the history that they have with sexual abuse, everybody always brings up the sexual abuse in the Catholic Church, and I'm not denying it, but I mean, the kind of stuff that was going on with Chabad Lubavitch, it can't be ignored. Even rabbis coming forward and talking about how bad it was, and it was culture. There were estimations that it was like 50 to 60% of like young children that were in this Chabad Lubavitch sphere were actually being sexually abused, which is crazy. And that those are statistics that and again, can't confirm or deny those or whatever, but even if a fraction of that is true, that dwarfs the problem that the Catholic Church was having, and still does have a little bit. So I think it's concerning. I think it's something to take note of, not obsess over, but seeing that kind of stuff doesn't exactly give me the warm and fuzzy about whatever they got going on down there.
I don't actually. I'm not too surprised by the news. The rabbinic Jews, especially as you get into more Hasidic types, are known for very strange legalistic practices. If the man-made religion, they look for all these different loopholes. So to hear the story about they're digging some strange tunnel to expand the size of their compound and connect it to some famed rabbi's former dwelling, it's not that surprising for me personally. That seems to be very in character with the type of strange things they do.
Well, you were saying earlier that you were actually pro-Jewish tunnels.
I mean, if it's easier for me to pick up bagels and lox, I don't see what the problem is.
Yeah, it does make you wonder. I know that there's another. You're talking about the whole the loophole religion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's another thing, and you see this in a lot of like high density Jewish areas. You actually have like this. I don't know what they call it, like a prayer wire or something like that. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
That's exactly what I'm thinking of. Yeah, you're hitting on it
Yeah,
exactly.
I think I heard something like that.
Yeah, so it's this like wire that runs around like business districts that are largely dominated by Jews. So you'll see it in something like Brooklyn, and it basically, it creates this, through the esotericism of their religion allows them to actually do work on the Sabbath day. So there's not even any need to get the Sabbath day holy because they got the special magic wire up that allows them to continue to make loans or do whatever.
Exactly. That's what I was hitting on exactly, Sean. You got it. I don't think it's strange. I think it's very in character. I think the tunnel is probably more in line with that type of legalistic thinking than the wire as well.
Right. And that is weird. And that is another concern. It's like we talk about, and we always talk about, like, at least I bring up a lot, that the problem with this concept of Judeo-Christian values, because there is a distinct separation there. And there's a lot of legalism within the Jewish religion, even in the more practicing side of Jew. Everybody talks about, secular versus religious, but even in the practical religious side of Judaism, there's still a lot of legalism incorporated with it, right? With this whole loophole, right? So if you can find a way, like, in a more religious oriented world, ideally, the Sabbath day is the most holy day of the week. You want to keep that day holy, right? They're finding legal loopholes to get around that, to continue to do the work, because obviously the secular side of things is more important to them than it is to the religious side of things, which I think should be concerning. So I don't particularly like the loophole style religion, and I think we also saw this with the interview a while ago with Dennis Prager, and whose show was he on? It was
Matt Fradd's show?
Yeah, Matt Fradd, Pints of the Aquinas, when they were getting at the root of that actual distinction, even with Orthodox Judaism, which supposedly is like the closest to Christianity. Even with that, we see a distinct and an important differentiation between the Christian belief and the Jewish belief when it comes to things like pornography and the entertaining of impure thoughts and these types of things. And we recognize that not just our intuition, but our impulses and how we manage those impulses up in our brain and what we entertain and what we don't is sinful. Whereas, the moral Jewish perspective would be, well, it's entertain it, do whatever, but it's your actions that matter, not your thoughts. And we wouldn't agree with that.
That just kind of puts in perspective once again that rabbinic Judaism is a man-made religion. The true Judaism of our fathers, of Abraham and Isaac, it's the Christian religion. It's following Christ the Messiah. And these are just sons of the Pharisees in many senses that fall into the same traps as their forefathers. For example, Christ gives about straining the gnat out of the water, but eating the camel. And I think we should just keep it in mind so that we shouldn't develop that same kind of mind way of looking at the world. We should try to be earnest in our worship of God, and not fall into these traps.
Yeah. And if they can find legal loopholes around the Sabbath, it makes you wonder what other legal loopholes they can find, especially when they're digging tunnels and soiled mattresses. It makes you wonder. What were you saying, Alex?
But they kind of the whole attitude, what Liam, you were saying earlier about, actions versus intention is where Judaism and Christianity differentiate. That is 100% the case. If we look at these as an individual, maybe the most immoral person possible, and they act on all of their negative vices, but they don't. They didn't do that because they have great self-control. The question is that person actually a follower if they just have really good self-control and don't with no intention of getting rid of those impure thoughts? Christian tradition would say no, to be in a state of grace, so that you must you don't need to just not do the sins. You have to truly desire not to do the sins in the first place.
Right. Yeah, like in the Catholic tradition, there's an understanding that the intention matters, right? Like if they did bring this example up because I think a lot of Catholics will ask this question about like in regards to confession. When you go to the priest for confession to get your sins confessed, say, well, if I'm on my way to go confess my sins, and let's say I have a mortal sin in my soul, and I'm struck by an 18-wheeler on the way there and die, well, do I go to hell? And it's like, the Catholic theology understands that there is an intention behind that, that active, like I'm actively going to confession, there is an attention, and so it allows for that kind of thing, right? But you still have to behave and act within the world that we're given, right? There is not like, oh, I believe that I'm forgiven, therefore I'm forgiven, or I intend to be forgiven. But if you don't actually make those actions towards achieving that salvation, that forgiveness, then you're not acting within the realm that we were given to, to behave accordingly to God, the way the system that God set up for us. So, and I think that is again an important distinction. And we've kind of drawn a wider conversation out of this, which is the distinction between Judaism and Christianity, which frankly I think maybe should be a conversation that happens more. You get a lot of this Bible Belt Christianity, which really has this Zionist view of the world, which is this kind of like undying allegiance towards Judaism and Israel because of this kind of misconceived notion about the relationship between Christianity and Judaism in the Old Testament and these types of things. And in the Catholic faith, there's actually Christian Zionism as a condemned heresy. You have to understand as a Christian, as Catholic, whatever, you have to understand that Judaism, the Jewish people, are in need of salvation just as much as the Hindus and the Muslims and whatever other religion, and we have to be willing to have those difficult conversations. I mean, and it is difficult because especially with we've seen these videos. I think is some Protestant pastors who've gone to Israel to try to, like, I think this was a couple months ago. You guys probably remember it, but they were actively trying to preach in the streets about it, and they were being like harassed by some of the Jewish kids and being spit on and stuff like that. Like, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, one of the things that sorry, Micah, go on.
But I was just going to interject in there that I was reading a little bit about it, and it's like after the Romans decimated Israel, and they were like basically came really close to being wiped out. That had a really big influence on Judaism, and that obviously the temple was destroyed, and their entire religion had to change. And in that context, they became a lot more concerned about survival. And in that context, they deemed it okay, basically, to use trickery and to lie and stuff about certain things. Like, for instance, they could sacrifice to the emperor, and that was considered fine as long as like they didn't actually believe that. Whereas like for the Christians, like that was anathema. So I thought that was a pretty insightful understanding to like how the religion evolved differently than Christianity over time. And and then I think just also to add into what you were saying, I think it's really key to understand that both Christianity and Judaism is about covenant with God, and that we believe that there's a new covenant, and that we believe that we are God's people. We are God's chosen people, and the Jews are welcome into that covenant, but they need to accept Jesus Christ in order to be in that covenant. And so it's not like there's from our perspective as Christians, it's not as if there's this chosen people and then there's the church. It's like, no, the church is the chosen people of God.
Yeah.
And that that covenant is open to the Jews, and we need to be trying to evangelize them along with everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you understand that perspective, you understand again that there is no Judeo-Christianity. Like, the Judeo part is the part that rejected God's covenant and his son sent into the world. So that's something that we can't compromise on as Christians.
Agree that one of the issues that I personally have with your lower church denominations is when they got rid of the institutions that Catholics and high church Protestants had generally agreed upon. They had got rid of some of the logical interpretations of the Bible in favor of their own, and one of them is that it's a very key interpretation to not just Western Christianity, but also Eastern Christianity. It's the idea that the church is the new Israel. The church itself is God's chosen people. The Israel that's discussed in the Bible is gone and has been truly succeeded by the church.
Yeah, and even the word Catholic, I mean, the word Catholic means universal for everybody. And this is something you see more often with Christians than you actually do with Judaism, is you don't see a lot of advocacy on the behalf of Judaism for converts, which is another thing that, ought to be, kind of make your head twist a little bit. As much as they might bother us and we might joke at it, you see these Seventh-day Adventists, or who is it? The people that come door to door all the time, the Mormons.
Jehovah's Witness does it.
Jehovah's Witness. That's what I was trying to think of. That all melds together. Coming door to door and actively trying to evangelize. You don't really see that with Judaism a whole lot. Even with Islam, problems that Islam has, but you do see it seems like even more so lately, you just see an active effort on conversion attempts towards Islam. And I don't see that a lot with Judaism, which I find a little strange. So it's just stuff worth considering. But I think we just need to know going forward that there are these conversations that are going to be had about the differences between Judaism and Christianity, and we just understand and meet that always in Christian charity, that hey, at the end of the day, we want everybody to convert and become part of that universal church, and that's what we're working towards. And it's not an exclusionary thing. At the end of the day, we are all God's children, and we're all working towards the same goal, and we need to be evangelists in that regard, and be willing to brave that difficult conversation and speak that truth, even if it's not exactly always the easiest thing to talk about. So I wanted to dig into a different topic, no pun intended. I want to dig into a new topic here. I like that transition a lot. So on the political side of things, we had kind of an eventful month, actually. The last big contender, in quotes, to Donald Trump in this primary election, Ron DeSantis, has officially dropped out. And I want to share just a clip from his speech here, because I thought it was pretty good. I know we'll talk about that. Let's listen first, and then we'll talk about it.
It's clear to me that a majority of Republican primary voters want to give Donald Trump another chance. They watch his presidency get stymied by relentless resistance, and they see Democrats using lawfare this day to attack him. Well, I've had disagreements with Donald Trump, such as on the coronavirus pandemic and his elevation of Anthony Fauci. Trump is superior to the current incumbent, Joe Biden. That is clear. I signed a pledge to support the Republican nominee, and I will honor that pledge. He has my endorsement because we can't go back to the old Republican guard of yesteryear, a repackaged form of warmed over corporatism that Nikki Haley represents.
I think what he said there is so important. And I know a lot of people, want to throw up the Gators love the swamp thing, and they're ready to throw Ron DeSantis out because he ran against Trump. But I think he made a really good point, and it's signaling something important here, which is that the party is shifting big time. And it's shifting away from Nikki Haley. I mean, even though he was running against Donald Trump, there is an allegiance towards a new idea of what, and when I say the party, we're obviously talking about the Republican Party, but I think that's just a label that's representing a kind of undercurrent of a larger movement, right? Labels come and go, Republican, conservative, whatever. There's a real populist movement that I think is going to develop into something important. And Ron DeSantis outlined it very, very, very succinctly there when he said, we cannot go back to the corporate party of yesteryear that is represented by people like Nikki Haley. And hopefully, everybody here and everybody listening in understands the problems with Nikki Haley and why it's so important to avoid her. And if you don't understand, then just go watch some of the things that she says, and I think you'll figure it out pretty quickly. But it's interesting to see that the party is developing. It really is. And I kind of want to get you guys' perspectives on that. I watched the whole speech by DeSantis when he dropped out, and I thought it was a pretty good speech. And I think, you know, if anybody is watching that hasn't watched it yet, just go look it up. It's like 4 minutes. I think it's worth watching. Even if you weren't the biggest fan of DeSantis, pay attention to the types of things he's saying, and then compare and contrast that to 2012 politics when our top guy was Mitt Romney, of all people, right? And take a look at how quickly, in just a decade, right, how quickly this party has developed, and how instrumental the kind of the populist surge behind Donald Trump has been for affecting that change. Now, Liam, I'll start with you on get your thoughts on that.
It's really good to see feuding brothers reconcile. It's very unfortunate, and that I think that DeSantis ran in the first place. It caused a lot of divisiveness, a big divide in the party, turned friends into enemies. But it's good to see him not continue to do what Nimrod has done, but to own up, to say that he's going to support Trump, that he's the candidate. And, you know, I think a lot of us who have been Trump supporters need to not hold that against DeSantis and the people, his supporters and the people who worked with his campaign, at least the good ones. And some of his campaign, maybe not so much the Democrats, but just the people who've been supporting DeSantis. My point I'm trying to make, we should support them. You know, you have to forgive your brother 7 times, 8 times, as many times as he offends you, you have to forgive him. So I think we just need to come together as a party, as Christian conservatives, to take over the Republican Party, to take over Washington, and to restore our country.
Yeah, that's huge. That allegiance, that Christian conservative element, right? And it may not be super well defined yet. I mean, even amongst the 4 of us, we might have different ideas of what that looks like. And certainly when you get into the broader, you know, I've started following some of these more left-wing. I subscribe to a Substack, and it's this like Christian nationalist watch. And I just kind of enjoy. Actually, it's it's actually pretty helpful, because I'm like learning about all these other things. I'm like, oh, cool, I can start looking into this now. You know, start building my networking through these people that are, you know, attacking us, which is funny. But, you know, it really is important to develop and create this Christian conservative movement. I mean, that term, you know, we talk about Judeo-Christian as being a term that doesn't work, but Christian conservative, I think that's a term that we should work on building and developing. And I think you see this with DeSantis. I think he is one of those guys. Personal disagreements and quarrels aside, I personally was not a supporter of DeSantis. I don't think that you can have Trump without, I don't think you can have Trumpism without Trump, as the saying goes. And Trump, you know, there is a bit of a revenge arc that has to play out here. You know, because of how aligned the establishment was against Trump in the previous election cycle and the election cycle now, to really kind of stick a finger in the eye of the previous establishment, whether we're talking about the Republican Nikki Haley establishment, or we're talking about the Obama Biden Democratic establishment, or if we're talking about the establishment that kind of rises above the political game altogether. We recognize that it's not working for the average American. It's certainly not working for Christians. And it's not progressing what should be our fundamental push, which is promoting and progressing Christian values in society. Because, you know, we talk about this all the time. This is one thing I talk with guys in membership interviews when they come on. I say, you know, a lot of us might have different perspectives. We might have certain isms that we like to attach ourselves to when it comes to politics. But at the end of the day, if you're not putting God at the top of the pyramid and letting everything else order from that, then we're not creating a successful a movement. And I think this has been the biggest change, and I don't think Trump set out with this intention, but I think that there was a growing movement underneath what Trump had kind of kicked over, right, of wanting to return to this Christian America that it now feels like they have the road kind of paved ahead for them, where they can advance these morals and these values, thanks to what Trump did, thanks to him, you know, just being the persona that he is, and not being afraid to kind of go up and butt heads with the establishment and pave that way forward. And I have an interesting theory on populism and stuff that we can talk about, but I want to get the rest of you guys' thoughts. So, Alex, what are you thinking on this?
Yeah, kind of going off of what you said, DeSantis, I think he exited the race with dignity and honor, and we as Christians should respect that. He understood his place that he is not the candidate, at least at this time. Perhaps maybe next election cycle. But his point about the old neocon guard of yesteryear, he's absolutely correct. One of the issues that many younger conservatives, Gen Z and millennial, have universily agreed upon is that the neocon establishment of our parents did not failed in stopping many of the the origins of many of the social movements that are just incompatible with Christianity. And we have a new duty as the new generation of conservatives to rectify that mistake. We understand that there are some things that they are not compatible with Christian virtue and Christian life. It's been a hard pill to swallow growing up in a society that preached to us consistently, you can have it all.
Right.
We can't.
Right. And I think the moral value structure that was sacrificed during, say, the boomer era for, the sake of the materialistic gain that it offered, we're not even seeing the results of anymore, right? I mean, look at your average American can't cover a $500 emergency payment, right? So the materialistic kind of dopamine-esque high that was being provided from that materialism that was given to the American people as a result of kind of maybe curtailing the religious and moral values as the backbone of society has really worn off. And now people are looking around and saying, well, what's left, right? If I can't, because young people are having a hard time going out and buying homes, starting families, right? You see a huge mental health crisis among younger people. So people are looking around and saying, well, what's left? And I think this is why you're seeing this resurgence, and not just populism, but again, the Christian moral value structure, because people are asking the more important questions now. And when that dopamine hit kind of wears off, and you're not able to occupy your mind and your body with what the secular world can offer you, those more important questions are what start to crop up and what start to dominate people.
Precisely. Christian values historically, while the U.S. has never been officially a Christian nation, Christian values were effectively the backbone of the U.S., and that neocon and neoliberal generation removed the spine. And right. Such as with all vertebrates, when you remove the spine, the animal is absolutely worthless. It doesn't do it. It's dead, effectively.
Yeah. Micah?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that, it's really the liberal, we get the neocon movement out of that, but I mean, I think philosophically underpinning everything is liberalism, whether it's classical liberalism or, libertarianism, especially, this concept that this state can be neutral and that individual freedom trumps any kind of moral value or moral virtue, and that religion itself is just something in the private sphere, completely in the private sphere, that has no place in the public sphere. I think we're seeing it play out now, that's simply a fairy tale. There is always a public religion, and what we're seeing, the public religion is, the nicest way to say it would be secular humanism, but really it's Satanism. Because what we're seeing is worship of the self, the murder of our children, and then we're seeing, the sexual degeneration that we're seeing is, this is all in line with like past pagan cultures. And when you turn the value away from Christ or to any kind of even if it wasn't Christian, but it still at least had some sort of transcendental value that it aimed at. I think I think in some ways even like ancient Rome or something, being pagan, what was in a better state than we are, because they still had a sense of piety. They still had a sense of maintaining sacred spaces and had a sacred attitude toward their ancestors. As evil as they were, don't get me wrong, but in this present kind of liberalism is a social acid that is just eats away at the bonds between people. And I don't know, I guess I'm going off on a soapbox, but
no, I mean, it's important. I think it is interesting to see how just a presidential election in the United States in 2020s is opening up a whole new box of worms, especially in our sphere. But I think you're really starting to see this expand out. It's opening up a whole new box of worms about the very idea of what the basis of our societies and the foundations of our societies are. Right? You were talking about liberalism, and that's something that stems back beyond the 1960s. Right? I think the revolutions of the 60s is
really.
Yeah, the revolutions of the 60s, within the last century is really kind of maybe the end game of of what liberalism is or what it amounts to, right? But this is something that started back with the idea, these Lockean, the Enlightenment, these Lockean ideas that come out of the French Revolution and really set the standard for a lot of Western civilization, which was so profoundly in contrast with, the old values of what Christendom, aligned itself with. And we're seeing the end game of that. And so it is kind of fun to tie these ideas into, it's like, well, we're talking about probably, speaking honestly, a largely secular guy, Donald Trump, who is running for president pretty much as a populist figure. Yeah, he's on the Republican ticket, but he's a populist figure, and how it's really unearthing all of these ancient ideas because people are so dissatisfied, and people are now, and this is why it's so important to be good representatives of these values in the religious and the cultural side of things, because now more than ever people are going to be receptive to this because they see that what is happening now is not working, and they were looking for something new. And the beautiful thing is we have what works. We already understand it. We don't have to sit here and invent and discover and come up with some new idea, right? We have the history of the church. We can look back at thousands of years of history and see how societies ordered themselves and understand that we did have a moral progression, and that we, through the Christian faith and the church, that we have morally progressed. But in a lot of ways, we've regressed, and there is, I think, a happy medium. And obviously, it's an imperfect world. We're never going to reach center the way we want to, but we're far off the mark right now. I think we can all fairly agree. And just seeing this kind of alignment, what a lot of people might want to just relegate into a small boundary of a political populist movement within the United States is actually branching out into a larger conversation. And I think maybe DeSantis touched on it without really saying it there in his concession speech, is that we cannot return to the Republican Party of yesteryear, because what that represents is something so much more than just corporate allegiances, and something so much more than just kind of these economic values of Social Security or something. But what it ultimately represents is, are we embracing secularism? Are we embracing this modern invention of democratic values within our republic as kind of what we're putting on our pedestal, what we're worshiping? Or are we moving towards something new, something better, something that Donald Trump certainly is not going to identify, and something that DeSantis probably hasn't identified, but something that a lot of people are starting to identify? And people like us, and I imagine the people that we're reading and the people that we're listening to, whether they're talking, speaking, writing now, or if they're been writing centuries ago, all ultimately understand.
Can I say one thing before we move on? You kind of touched on it, Sean. I'm sure there's probably a lot of Christians who've been supporting Ron DeSantis and other Christians in general who are surprised or dumbfounded in that there can be such a great Christian support for Donald Trump. But I think that because he is in many ways an immoral man, and I think he's proven to be, and you see somebody like Ron DeSantis, who by all appearances is a good Christian man, I think we just have to, those people need to keep in mind to understand where we're coming from, is that it's like William F. Buckley Jr. said, the Catholic Christian American conservative political commentator. We have to vote for the most viable option, who right now that's Donald Trump. He's the political figure who can actually win an election, beat Joe Biden, go to Washington, D.C., and destroy the corrupt anti-Christian establishment. Even though the man, Donald Trump, I think we could all admit, is not perfect. In many ways, he's deeply flawed and immoral. But in this sense, he's almost like our King Cyrus, the King Cyrus of the modern age, doing the will of God, hopefully, in a sense, and helping restore America's Christian foundation.
Yeah, I think it's important to think about this, not to use a tired analogy, but to really think about this as a chess game, right? Like, sure, if you were to put this all down on paper, you could probably say as a Christian, it's like, well, Ron DeSantis is probably the better choice than Donald Trump or whoever, right? But this is more of a chess game, right? And I think those of us who can kind of see towards the end game recognize that this is a step in the right direction. I alluded to earlier kind of my theory with Donald Trump and populism in general, but in my very layman's understanding of history, I think I've been able to identify a trend with populism, and populism almost always as a precursor to something else or a transition period, right? Populism does not generate populism is not a generative political movement in and of itself. It's not an ideology in and of itself. It's a representation of a transition between an old system and a new system. You saw this in Rome leading up to Caesar and his kind of transitioning the Roman Empire from its republican days to its more imperial days, where you had these populist figures of the Gracchi brothers, and they were more like I don't know what a good example would be. I guess like your Muskian, your Elon Musk type figures, right? Of the Roman days. You had the French Revolution, which was very much a populist uprising, maybe not, definitely not a positive one, but a populist uprising nonetheless. Maybe it was stirred by some interest. Populist nonetheless led to your Napoleon figure. Not a great guy, but still represents a transition. And so I think that's what we're seeing in the United States. There's a lot of observations. And to be clear, I'm not, as an organization, I iterated this in the beginning. I want to reiterate it now. As an organization, we're not endorsing any one political candidate or political party. I can speak for myself and say that, where my head's at, and I think a lot of you guys' heads are at, is, kind of following this Trump train and seeing where it goes and what doors it opens for us. But there is this understanding that this populist movement is giving birth to something new. And I don't know what 2024 is going to look like. I don't know what the election results are going to be. And I don't know what that leads to. But I think, 4 years, 5 years from now down the road, when we're looking at a 2028 election, it could be a very different world. A very different world. And who knows what kind of figures are going to rise up. Maybe DeSantis is going to be the guy. Maybe it's going to be somebody entirely new that we haven't even seen on the political sphere yet. But we're in kind of uncharted waters when it comes to the political establishment and the way that things are moving. And I think that's an exciting thing in a lot of regards, because ultimately, if there is this revision or revolution in a certain way, we're moving away from a system that we already know isn't working. And so I think that ultimately it's going to, if we take the authority that we've been granted with, right, and we really make the conceded effort to steer this in the right direction, we could be looking at something a lot better. The transition period might be tough, it might be difficult, but it requires, I think, men who understand what's happening to take the proper actions to kind of steer things in the right direction.
Yeah, I want to add one more thing to that too, because I think it's important to point out that I don't think this is politics as usual. I think we're standing at the threshold. We're already basically under occupation. Like I believe that the government we currently have was not legitimately elected. I don't think that's not a very popular thing.
I don't know if we can say that on YouTube, but
I think that's pretty I think that's pretty well understood by a lot of people. And so we're essentially at war right now. And I mean, it's like war by other means. I'm not saying we got to pick up guns, but I'm just saying, like, we're trying to find a general. We're trying to find somebody who's going to break some stuff. And there's, and the way that the power structure is ruling is not, just as simple as, who wins the election. So it's like we need somebody who has the capacity and that has the kind of connections and the kind of personality that's going to be able to actually not only just get elected, but also take some power. Because we saw last time Donald Trump got elected that he had a real hard time actually taking power. But I think a lot of people have the hope that this time around, with all of the lessons that he's learned and with the kind of personality that he has, that he might be able to actually be a lot more effective. And I think most people look at someone like DeSantis and it's like, I have my disagreements, especially about his foreign policy, but at the same time, I have a lot of disagreements with Trump too. Like there's a lot of things that I'm just really unhappy with him about, but I just don't think DeSantis would be effective at all. I mean, I think he would. I mean, I could be wrong about that, but I mean, that's the vibe I get. It's like, this guy's going to go to Washington, and not because of any defect of his personality per se, but just because he does not have that force. And he also does not have the connections that you have to make. And the populist part, I mean, I believe the ultimate elites rule this country, and as it should be. Like, it's always going to be elites. The question is, do we have good elites or bad elites? And right. Populism, though, is a pathway forward to getting new elites into power. And it's like, no matter whether you're elite or not, you still have to have the people behind you. Look at like Julius Caesar or Napoleon or someone like that. And so I think, Trump has a lot of potential there for that. So
I think that's so important. You hit on such an important point there. This, I briefly started looking into what they kind of call Italian elite theory. But you really have to break out of this. Even if you're on the right, you have to break out of this libertarian mindset that there is just going to be this grassroots uprising and we're going to, overturn everything and return to the happy-go-lucky days of democracy as it was intended. And that's not the case. humanity, human beings are naturally hierarchical, right? There's always a hierarchy structure. And the problem with, modern democracy, in quotes, is that a lot of that authority and the decisions that are being made is obfuscated through the managerial class, through the behemoth that is our modern American bureaucracy. And so when there are problems, which there are many of today, you're sitting there and you're wondering, well, who do I point the finger at? Who do I hold responsible for this? Who is the authority that's going to take responsibility for the problems that we're having? And we're not seeing that, right? And I think that's another thing that appeals. And you were talking about the authoritarian aspect of it. It's like having that general who's going to kind of take the reins. Look how positively the right wing reacted when Trump, kind of colloquially said, I'm only going to be a dictator on day one. And people were like, yes, like at least one day of dictatorship. Like people were so desperate for something like that because they want that leadership, because they're so tired of being victimized by a bureaucracy. Where
it's a tyranny of like, it's a kind of tyranny, like you said, where you can't point the finger at anyone, and without vested authority and power in someone, we're already feeling ourselves as the victim of like this tyranny, and it's like we don't know how to fight back against it. I mean, it's very ineffectual. Like, you can make videos, but they censor you. You can vote, but that's not been very effective past.
Well, and even still, it's like, I don't want to completely disparage voting, but at the same time, it's like, let's just take this year as an example, going into 2024, right? Going into the 2024 election. We could have the most legitimate, fair election ever in American history, right? It could be clean as clean can be, Mr. Clean, magic eraser clean. And it doesn't matter, because so much trust has been eroded from the system that people are not going to accept the results. If Trump wins, if Trump wins and Biden loses, the left is not going to accept those results. If Biden wins and Trump loses, the right is not going to accept those results. What? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And we already know this. And everybody's already made their mind up about who the new, who the next president is. And I don't think anybody is actually just waiting to see, the merits of democracy, quote unquote, play themselves out. I think people know where this is. And that's kind of one of the scary and concerning things going forward, is like, what does that look like? What happens? But the other thing is, there's also I think a glint of hope at the end of the tunnel, where it's like people are really seeing things for what they are now. And I think we have to have that conversation, however that pans out, to get ourselves to a better place. So, and I know this conversation has kind of gone a long way from DeSantis, but any other thoughts on the DeSantis and just generally on the primary going forward? Because I think there's going to be a lot of talking points in the months to come about that. Anybody want to say anything on Nikki Haley? I mean, she still hasn't dropped out yet. Anybody voting for Nikki Haley here?
I think
Nikki Haley, I've looked into some of her things, and the way that she flip-flops as that quote-unquote the old guard, as DeSantis said, her only real base that she has left, I think best case scenario for her would be the libertarians, libertarian Americans. However, that's not a good position, as libertarians despise Nikki Haley's foreign policy. And so her one base, to me, to a vote for Haley now is maddening. She has no base to appeal to, and whatsoever.
Yeah. What were you gonna say, Liam?
I think Vivek Ramaswamy said it very well in that primary debate, that Nikki Haley is corrupt. All she does is represent the corrupt uniparty of the Republicans and Democrats, the same elite, corrupt scumbags that all of the American people have been tired of for generations now, that are leading our country to utter destruction. And frankly, I think she's just a reincarnation of the Hillary Clinton campaign. And America under Nikki Haley would be no different than America under Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton. It would just be the same leftist, anti-Christian bureaucrats running the show.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't know if I would vote. I mean, it's like, I don't know if I would vote for Biden or Haley. It's like,
I'd vote American Solidarity Party.
Yeah. I'd vote for Caesar. Let's do I just out of curiosity, we'll have a little fun with this, but a quick round the table. I don't know if there's some disclaimer I should throw out with this or not, but what are your guys' just general predictions, right? when none of us know anything, making predictions about the future is dumb, but to have some fun with it. What are you guys' predictions for the 2024 election? We'll start with you, Alex.
I think if there is a candidate that has even a shot at winning as a write-in, it's going to be Trump, whether or not Haley gets the nominee based on shenanigans. Haley is just not as popular as a Republican candidate to even have a shot. Now, if Trump wins, whatever means he does get in, I could see, we would see increased rights just as we saw for the 2016 election, but on a much larger scale. Trump's only real weakness, I think, going forward would be how much do people hate him versus their disappointment in Joe Biden. Is even people that I've personally met who were staunchly Biden supporters at the beginning of his presidency have admitted that he is absolutely pathetic and incompetent. That if it would be a Trump versus Biden situation, again, many of once staunch Biden supporters would vote for Trump. I just cannot see a possible victory for the Democratic Party this election.
What are you thinking, Liam?
I'm cautiously hopeful in a sense. Even CNN is predicting that Trump is going to win the election at this point. I don't think that the uniparty establishment, as we're often referred to them as, the corrupt anti-Christian elites, I don't think they're competent enough anymore to prevent Biden and them from being ousted out of power. They've degenerated so much that I just do not even think they're capable of retaining their seats of power anymore. That's what happens when you give in to vice and sin.
Yeah. Micah?
Yeah, I think Liam hit the nail on the head. And I think that I've come around slowly because I was kind of more in the camp of like, there's no way he's going to be able to win because just all the machinations against him. But I've changed my mind now. And I think that essentially, I mean, I could be wrong, but this is my prediction, is that he's basically an unstoppable force at this point. And I think that what you're going to see happen is, and we mentioned this earlier before we started recording, but that, they're like very powerful people that don't want to lose their power are going to see the handwriting on the wall, and they're going to ultimately side with Trump because it's in their best interest to do so. Because, a lot of these people are just ultimately sycophants, and they're going to side with the power. Right. And I think that Trump, because he has so much populist momentum, that he has the power, and if he does get elected, he's going to have such a political check to cash that there's going to be hell to pay. There's going to be heads rolling, figuratively speaking. Yeah. And I think there's going to be like nationalization of companies, new people placed on board of directors. There's going to be potentially some serious shifts in the power structure, and that these sycophantic people in the merchant class, they just want to be on the side of power. And so it's kind of like a snowball effect where some of these people start siding with Trump, and then next thing you know, that is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then right. He's going to actually, potentially, at least, I mean, who knows how it'll play out, but potentially I think that we're looking at like it could potentially be like a political revolution, and very different than 2016. Because like I said, I think if he comes back into power, it's going to be a different animal in the White House.
Yeah, and I think you see that, this kind of like this kind of like aligning with the power structure already a little bit with this rejection of wokeism. And I don't like using that term a whole lot, but you do see it a little bit. Like these companies can only lose money for so long, right? When we talk, like every commercial has to be, you're promoting some kind of like some kind of weird oddity, right? Every movie has to be, like the increased like focus, like shove it in your face, like look, homosexuality, look at it, right? Or like look, interrace couples or whatever. Just like and not that in that the latter doesn't matter a whole lot, but still, it's just like the fact that they're really trying to like make that a focus, right? They're trying to take these things that are just kind of normal, like this is like it fits the liberal agenda, and they're trying to like shove that in your face, is not working. And we kind of saw this with Bud Light a little bit. People are saying they're bouncing back, but there was still like a big statement made with that, right? And I think that, you know, Bud Light made some business decisions that kind of salvaged their company a little bit, but you know what they didn't do is double down on it, right? They kind of backed off. They tried to quiet that part of their business strategy. And you're probably not going to see them, you know, throw another tranny on a beer can again anytime soon, right? And people might say that it was a loss because the company didn't go under or whatever, but I think it sets a standard and a precedent. It's like, where's the power structure falling now? You know, who's setting the dictates? It used to be the liberal system. It used to be the liberal order. Now we're kind of seeing maybe this pendulum start to swing back in the other direction, where there's this kind of rejection of it. And especially when you have the strongman figure who can kind of lead that charge, you are going to see that realignment of the power structure. The people who are not, you know, they're not Bible believing liberals, if that makes any sense. They're not adhere to the core values. They're adhere to the power structure and what grants them the power that they have, and the authority and the money. So I think there's a good point to be made for that. As far as my specific prediction goes, leaning back a little bit on what I was saying earlier about a rejection of the results, no matter which way it goes, I think you could see genuinely another contestation of the election for sure, kind of like we had in 2020. But I don't think this one's going to be eagerly or readily conceded by either side very quickly. So my guess is going to be that, and you're seeing the groundwork of this being laid already. We'll get into it in a second, but I think you're going to see a long-term legal battle between two political parties, one saying that Trump won, one saying that Biden won, or, you know, whoever, if Biden doesn't end up being the candidate. And you see these back and forth, you know, and these legal battles can go on for many months and ages. And so I wonder if maybe there's even going to be this kind of like two-state system, if not, you know, in actuality, at least in perception, there's this two-state system that's happening where, you know, you have the kind of right-leaning states accepting Trump's victory, and you're having the left-leaning states accepting Biden's victory, and there's not an agreement on who's actually in charge. And then, you know, what that kind of that results in some problems. We're already having issues just barely every so often when we're doing these debt ceiling votes. We're barely passing budgets for the government already. You know, what happens when suddenly each side becomes super entrenched about who is running the country? Well, maybe budgets aren't getting passed. Maybe you're starting to see a shutdown of like the normal you know, the normal government functions, which starts to hamper, you know, and we could go back to COVID type times where things aren't functioning the way they're supposed to be. But this time as a result of a political upheaval rather than you know, a medical one per se. So that's kind of the way I see things going. That's just a prediction. I could be totally wrong. But in my opinion,
can I bring up something that you kind of referenced that I think might not make that come true? It's Joe Biden's health. Sincerely, may God bring him to repentance and grant him eternal rest. I don't think he's long for this world. I think he's degenerating before our eyes. I don't envision there being a drawn-out political fight between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, because Joe Biden will either be dead or be nearing the grave and just so incompetent that it wouldn't be possible, that they would just have to cut their losses.
Yeah. I mean, that's true too. I think, and I say Biden, but when I say Biden, I'm really more talking about the regime. You know, there's obviously still a lot of speculation out there as whether or not Biden's going to be the one on the podium at the end of the day when the election comes around. I don't know, but I think it's underlying both Trump and Biden, or, you know, insert X candidate here. Again, there's this huge political polarity between the two, and I don't think, you know, I think that the right has finally found their traction with not just conceding and rolling over, and they've finally been able to make that distinction between the Haley type side of the party and the, you know, Ramaswamy, Trump, DeSantis side of the party. And I think that gives
we watched Asa Hutchinson get booed in West Palm Beach. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. So and that's something that's super exciting, and we still have a whole year of this kind of stuff to play out before we actually get to the election. You know, and I think that cycle is only going to continue. So that encourages me that the right is finally at a point where they're not ready to just roll over and be like, okay, left, do what you want. Yes, yeah, you know, have men dressed up as women read to my children in the public library. I like that. I think the right's finally like, you know what? No, like there's too much to lose. There's too much at stake at this point. And if that's the case, because really, I think the ball's in their court. It's in the right's court. It's how they're going to react. Are you going to concede, or are you going to realize that, you know, there are values beyond the idealisms of democracy that matter in this country, that are actually going to that are going to perpetuate this kind of legal battle that could result in maybe a two-state system. I don't know. I think that's a worst case scenario. I'm not gonna be a Tim Pool type Civil War guy, but I think it would play out. I think it would play out a little differently.
Like what you're pointing out is exactly going to play into this, though, where the government has become so dysfunctional, and like literally we're really not being governed. There's like special interest groups and bureaucrats and I don't know, people that are just so far in left field that they are just,
it's the managerial class.
It's hard to tell whether they're intentionally trying to destroy our country or what.
Yeah.
But it's so dysfunctional that everyone sees it.
Mm-hmm.
So that there's a power vacuum. And it, like, you know, I don't want to, I mean, and like I said, I'm not a huge fan of Trump anyways, but I do think we just need this kind of person. And he has the potential to be like this demagogic figure. And that's why they're scared of him. Because, you know, what other president have we ever seen in our lifetimes where, you know, 3 years after the election's already been lost, there's still like Trump, you know, Trump signs in everyone's yard. At least where I live, like if you go rural Tennessee, I mean, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, there, you know, he has a like it's almost fanatical. So, and it's like 50% of the country. So, like 50% of the country is like a fanatical Trump supporter, from what I can tell. Mm-hmm. And that is something that's scary to the regime. And I think they should be scared because, like, there's such a power vacuum that all it takes is a person with that kind of personality and that kind of following, that if he plays his cards right, you know, he will have the political power to effectuate something, and hopefully it's something good.
Yeah,
I don't know, you know, I mean, I'm kind of like on the fence about it, but you know, it's better than, I'll take my chances compared to what we got.
Well, he'll certainly have the support, and you know what you notice is you don't have the Jared Kushner type figures hanging around much anymore. At least I haven't seen any of him. It does signal to me that maybe there is a bit of a new Trump here that's coming to bear.
Trump is coming in, like, I think he lived through being sabotaged, and
he's a loyalist. You know, he loyalty matters to that guy.
Yeah, and he has treated people well that have stabbed him in the back, and like he's the man for the hour. Like if it happens, I mean, I just hope that we got to pray to God that God uses him as an instrument, and that, you know, because it's just as I mean, I'm not a really big fan of populism in general. You know, it's like it's a dangerous animal, but unfortunately, you know, I'm not a big fan of democracy anyway. So it's like, unfortunately, we got this system, and but I do think that my only point was to reiterate what you were saying, but also to say that kind of plays into where everything is so dysfunctional that you're right, we could see this kind of thing. And it's exactly in that milieu that you might see someone's taking power in a less traditional way. I don't know what that looks like, but you know, we already saw it kind of when Biden won. I mean, they put like 50,000 troops in DC. You weren't allowed to mention on, you know, YouTube or something that maybe the election was tampered with. You know, like this kind of stuff is draconian and kind of like third world. So we've already seen that happen the first time. So like, you know, if Trump, I mean, I don't know. So we could see things playing out that are going to be abnormal.
Pretty electric. And for the sake of transition, playing into my theory of the two-state system, we've seen an interesting foundation kind of being laid just within the last couple of days when we're looking at what's happening in Texas and the border crisis. And so, as you guys know, and a lot of these figures have been coming out lately. There's been more illegal immigration under Biden's presidency in the last 4 years or 3 years than ever in American history. The amount of illegal immigrants, I don't know the number off the top of my head, basically would constitute the 18th most populous state if they were just put together in one place, which is crazy. And we've seen
10 million. I don't know if that's accurate.
I mean, you could tell me 30 trillion and I would believe it. You know, it's like it's such a problem. And the Democrat solution to this right now is there needs to be a faster pathway to citizenship. But they give these guys court dates. And it's 2035. They'll give them court dates for 2035, literally 10 years away, and then they just send them off into the country. And not only that, but there are these organizations that are explicitly making attempts at taking this population and getting them to the different quarters of the country for the, for the sake of diversity or whatever their excuse is. And it's causing a huge problem. And I really don't see how this is a winning issue for the left. But I wanted to bring up the border crisis thing, because we're seeing an interesting, again, and going back to say that like the right is finally not willing to concede because the left has gone so far with things. The right has found their traction. You had Governor of Texas, why am I blanking on his name right now? What's his name? Abbott. Thank you. Yeah. Governor Abbott standing up and saying, I'm not putting it. We're going to take the constitutional authority that we have, and we're going to enforce our border. And then immediately you had a series of states, my home state of Virginia, DeSantis down in Florida, Georgia, a lot of others, some even actively sending National Guard down to Texas to help with the border crisis. So I think this is setting up an interesting scenario. What have you guys been observing with all that? We'll start with you, Alex.
I've been honestly in full support of Texas. I am an immigrant myself. I was not born into this country. I adopted from the Philippines. So this immigration to me has always been a personal issue. But what Texas is doing, it is absolutely within his right. The current state of the border, it's a mess. It needs to be brought to heel. What we're seeing is it's ironic that the left is so against getting the border control. Is this is the same party that is advocating for drug rehabilitation, supposedly anti-child abuse, as all parties should be. However, what we're seeing with coming across that border, it's contradictory. There is a ton of children from Central and Latin America that are being illegally trafficked into this country. And earlier, this summer with the Sound of Freedom brought it up at the very end when they gave statistics, is that the U.S. and Europe are the largest consumers of child pornography. And with so many children unrelegated at the border, that's a recipe for disaster. Yeah. That the left really needs to get its head out of the ideals and understand the pragmatic reason of wanting to secure our border.
Yeah. Liam?
Yeah, there's a couple things with the issue. I think it's very clearly that the federal government and Joe Biden and his entire administration are failing the American people, violating the Constitution in that it's the federal government's job to secure our borders, to defend us from invasion. That's the compact of the states. And Joe Biden is refusing to do that. They're actively doing the opposite, taking down the border protections that the state of Texas has been putting up. And now even the Supreme Court has ruled in favor of the federal government. Now we're seeing all these states acting contrary to that and sending their own National Guardsmen to defend it. I think it's, in a sense, it's unfortunate. It's terrible that Joe Biden and the Democrats are doing this to our country. But it's a good thing to see that there's still brave men willing to stand up and say, no, we're going to defend our homes. And I think it's also really telling that as Christian conservatives, we need to be willing to get in these institutions like the National Guard, for example, or politics. So I know some Christian men are afraid of politics, but we need to be in these different offices to take back our institutions in order to effectively fight against what's going on in our country. I think it's good that Alex is pointing out, there's a lot of people who think this idea of open borders is empathetic. It's not. It's actually evil. Our open borders we have with Mexico enables the coyotes to traffic all these children, like Alex referred to. Most women who get trafficked across the southern border are raped. Not only the coyotes, but also the cartels peddling the fentanyl and this other garbage in the United States that gets people addicted and killed by these horrible drugs that have just destroyed America.
Didn't State Department released that 70% of fentanyl that's killing American citizens comes from the southern border.
And it funds these cartels. These cartels then make this money off it, and they kill innocent people in the United States and Mexico. It is not compassion. Open borders does nothing but destroy our nation. And it's good to see that governors are standing up against it.
Yeah, and more importantly, I mean, it really severs the identity. I was talking about this earlier, but it's like, well, you just hate immigration because you don't like brown people. And it's like you've got Venezuelans, Mexicans, Haitians, Chinese, anybody and everybody knows that they want to get in this country. They know where to go. They go down to the southern border, right? It severs the integrity of what this nation is and its identity beyond the economic problems and beyond the crime problems. And all of these things are very valid points. But, the crux of the issue is, in order for a nation to sustain itself and to project itself and to do anything, it has to have a national identity. And we already talked about the political polarization that's going on in this country. Well, what happens when you inject dozens of different cultures with all their different cultural values, and now they're all tugging on the fabric of the same flag and trying to run in different directions with it, right? That doesn't create for any continuity. That creates more strife, right? And now you have people competing for the cultural values that they want to see present in their own communities, and they can't even do that. And so I think that creates a big problem, and I think that's a big part of the liberal agenda, is this kind of homogenization and the rejection of any identity. We see this with the attack on the family, and we see this with the attack on the nation, this rejection of identity. So you get this global homogenous materialist class where, your biggest identity is the brand that you wear in your shirt or the football team that you watch on Sunday afternoon. And I think that's a big problem too, and that has to be something that conservatives are willing to address. I love the points about, the crime and all this stuff, and it is hugely important. But I think there's also a deeper level to it that a lot of guys don't want to touch on because of the, the forbidden racism word that everybody's afraid of being labeled. But I don't want to see, Japan suffer this issue. I don't want to see Mexico suffer this issue. I don't want to see any nation suffer the issues that, United States and some of these other Western countries are suffering with this massive immigration. So, Micah, you got any points on that?
I mean, I would agree with you certainly about obviously this issue is causing, if you want to be a nationalist at all, you have to have borders, you have to have a people, you have to have an ethnos. And, it's fine that we have a multi-ethnic ethnos, but if you just open the border up to illegal immigration, then that's destabilizing, deracinating, and it's like you said, it's like essentially we don't have a nation, we have an economic zone, which seems to be what the elites, especially the global elites that are in Brussels and stuff like that, that's what they want for us. It's like, we don't deserve our own homeland, we get an economic zone. And even there, it's like, if you're, a blue collar guy or something, you can barely even support a family now because you're competing with all this stuff. But I would also say that I'm a little bit suspicious about this whole thing, and I haven't been following it super closely, but it's kind of smacks of political theater to me, because I feel like, it's just one of those things where it's like all the Republicans and a lot of them are just, they're the same people that have been supporting open borders, all along, like Nikki Haley, just people like this, that are it just looks real good, and it's in a political year, and it's like, I just get like a little bit suspicious of it. I'm like, what's going on here? It just seems like a lot of theater to me.
Well, yeah, I think that's a fair point, but there's also a point to be made within that, which is, they're doing it because it's politically popular. It goes back to like, okay, we're setting the narrative now. It's like, if they're doing this within their own interest because it's politically popular to support closing the border, fine, whatever, go be the politician that you are, but we're setting the standard now. We're saying what we want, and you are adhering to that or you're not. If you want to win elections, you play by our rules now, and that's so important.
Sure, but there's an element that it seems to me that there's an element where nothing effectual is happening, but there's a lot of noise being made about it. Like, look what we're doing, and kind of get the people, it's the typical election year stuff where it's like, even Trump did it, where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna like shut the border down, and it's like, no, you didn't.
Yeah.
It's like, whereas like, I believe that, I don't know if there's with the political, so if there was the political will for it, it very easily and very effectively. But that's just my little 2 cents. I heard some other people like having a similar discussion, so it's just.
We'll have to see if Trump follows through on his promise of the largest deportation effort in world history when he takes power, because I think that was a pretty popular sentiment that he expressed.
I also got to say, did y'all see Trump's little tweet he tweeted out or whatever it was for, calling on the governors to send National Guard troops to Texas and stuff? Yep. I thought that was a pretty awesome power move. It's like he's basically exercising power and authority before he's even been elected. He's like,
yeah, that plays right.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a pretty powerful move. It's like,
I think that plays right back into my theory of the two-state system. I mean, again, that's why I wanted to reference this, is because you're seeing the way it could happen right now. I mean, not even could. I mean, it technically is happening right now. You can just see it up to a different degree. So, but
Well, he was the duly elected president. But.
yeah. All right. We've been talking for a while, so I want to wrap things up here. But just like we always do when we wrap up our conversations, we're going to go around and we're going to say our black pills for the month and our white pills for the month. We always want to end on a white pill because we are positive people and we are trying to affect change in a positive direction. So we'll go around the table. Alex, what's your black pill?
Black pill, I said it before this. I'll expand on it a little more. Today in Walmart, I saw a pro Satanist shirt, and that wasn't the only. There was just a lot of degeneracy being promoted in general, and more. It's sad seeing people so eager to see the degradation of the uniquely divine creation of God.
Liam, black pill.
Mine is Amy Coney Barrett betraying America, betraying conservatives by voting with the liberals on the court against Texas and for the Biden administration removing Texas border protections. Dante says that traitors inhabit one of the lowest pits in hell, so I really hope she turns back.
Micah, black pill.
All I got for you is personal experience today. Like I said, going to Target. It's been a long time since I walked into a place like that. I saw some crazy stuff in there. It was like, first of all, they had the models up on the wall were like these super fat black ladies and like just all this stuff. And I'm like, is this what we are? What is this like degenerate view? And then I walk a little further down and it's like all of the detergent is locked up. I mean, whole aisles of detergent. So people are like stealing detergent so much. And this is at a Target. And it's not like in like the nicest town, but it's not like, in a particularly bad area either. And I just, it just left such a bad taste in my mouth. I'm like, man, and like the whole time, and they were playing like rap music. The whole scene in there was just like, had me shedding a tear for the country. Yeah, I was just like, man, we got a long ways to go to fix this, but
if only you knew how much better things could be.
Guy, so I'm like, that's just my little black pill since we asked for one.
Yeah. Well, here's my black pill.
And I'm the man who don't respect.
Let's look at the stats. I've got the facts. My money like Lizzo, my pockets are fat. Homie, I'm epic. Don't be a whack. Dog, it's a yarmulke. Homie, no cap. Look at the graphs. Look at my charts. You're blowing money on strippers and cars. You going to prison. I'm on television. Dogs, no one knows who you are. Keep hating on me on the internet. My comment section all woke.
That's enough of that.
Why do you subject me to that, Sean? I could have gone my entire life never hearing that.
I'm pretty sure this violates the Eighth Amendment. It's cruel and unusual punishment.
That is the Republican Party of yesteryear that DeSantis rejects. I just want to make that statement. So, all right, very quickly, let's go around on white pills, and then we'll call it a day. Michael, we'll start with you.
I'm just gonna give the easy one. Christ is king and he's sitting on the throne.
Amen. Liam.
Just encountering other young men in my profession that are finding Christ. It's not like they all have some great knowledge. They're expert theologians, but we live in a post-Christian society. And it's good to start seeing other guys, catch on and start their journey. And that just gives me a lot of hope for the future.
Yep. It's important to be leaders for those guys too, because they're starting their journeys, and we have the responsibility to be there for them. Alex.
We had one new guy join our Bible study up where I'm at, not Christian, but he's said that he wants to actually know about the faith from Christians, not from outsiders.
Awesome. Good to see. My white pill for the month is all the March for Lives that we've been doing. I went to one with a bunch of guys in DC. There's been a couple more that our organization has been participating in across the country. It's great to see us be able to come together and do these events and grow like we are. And I'm excited to see what we're going to do for the future, because we seem to be getting bigger and bigger every year, and we get to get more and more guys out to these events. So it's definitely a big white pill. It shows that what we're doing is working and it's right, and people want to be a part of it. So with that, if you are a follower and you are not a member, why not? Please consider joining us. The more people that we get involved in this organization, the more things we can do, the better impact that we can have. And all we need is, all you need to have is the will to act. That's what we ask for. We want guys who want to be here. We want you to be a part of this just as much as we want to be a part of this, and really use our organization, our fraternity, as a means for effective change in this country. So please, please, please consider supporting us. If you cannot be a member directly with us, and if you can be a member directly with us, reach out to us via our website and become a part of what we're building here. We're always looking for new guys, and building this fraternity is so important for setting the new standard going forward. So thank you, gentlemen, to all of you for being here tonight and having this conversation. I think it was a great conversation. It probably ran longer than our normal ones, but it's because we had a lot of good things to say. So appreciate you guys being here as always. And for all of you who are sitting and watching, appreciate you guys participating in this conversation with us. Support us on our social media if you're not already, and reach out to us if you want to become a member. We will be back next month. And I think that's it. So thanks, guys. God bless.